Welcome back to The World Over Live. My first guest was Speaker of the House for 4 years. He plotted the Republican Revolution on Capitol Hill and has distinguished himself as an author, consultant, and film producer. He's also a Catholic convert and one of the lead candidates running for the GOP presidential nomination. We spoke to him earlier today in our D.C. studio. Newt Gingrich. Take a look. I want to start with this HHS mandate. We've been reading so much about it, hearing so much about it. Every pulpit in the nation is fired up over this. You were one of the first people to draw national attention to this in some of those debates. Tell me, what would you do if you were president this November?
Well, I mean, what I will do on January 20th is issue an executive order suspending all of the anti-religious bigotry in the Obama administration. I will also ask the Congress to investigate the possibility of impeaching Judge Baer, who is a judge in San Antonio, who issued an injunction last year saying that not only could students not pray at their graduation, they could not use the word invocation, benediction, God. They could not ask for a moment of silence, and they could not ask the audience to stand, and that he would jail the superintendent. Now, I don't think we have to have anti-religious bigots in bureaucracies, and I don't think we have to have anti-religious bigots on the court. So as president, I would take a very aggressive position in favor of the freedom of religion.
Tell me for a moment, there's been a lot of focus on Catholic institutions, Catholic hospitals, Catholic churches, Catholic schools. What about those with a conscience who are employers, who feel uncomfortable offering this type of procedure and these medicines, if you can call them that, abortifacients and contraceptives, to their employers? Where do they go for redress, even if the Catholic Church gets an opt-out?
That's why you have to reestablish what George W. Bush had issued was an executive order that said no one could be forced to engage in a procedure against their religious beliefs. And I think that's you're going to see come back to that kind of position, that in fact we have to have a right of conscience. You know, people sometimes forget a major driving force in the creation of the United States was a belief that in Europe you couldn't have religious liberty. And so Catholics came to Maryland, Quakers came to Pennsylvania, Pilgrims came, and Puritans came to Massachusetts. John Williams goes to, or Roger Williams rather, goes to Rhode Island. I mean, all of these are religiously motivated people seeking freedom. And you see steadily over the last 50 years a secular governmental anti-religious bias building in this country.
And you feel you have a political opening here against Governor Romney? Why on this point of the HHS regulation?
I don't know if it's an opening, but it is. The White House was accurate yesterday in saying that Governor Romney had imposed on Catholic hospitals issuing abortifacients and had actually overruled his own public health department. His public health department said clearly under the right of conscience they didn't have to do it, and the governor's office intervened and said yes, they did. So in that sense, Governor Romney was on the same side as Obama in seeking to impose secular values on Catholic institutions.
Now, the Romney campaign claims that he vetoed that piece of legislation, and this was imposed on him.
Well, it's a three-step process. He vetoed it early on. They overrode his veto. His public health department said under the conscience clause, the Catholic Church was clearly exempt from because it was an earlier law. And then his office overrode his public health department. But it's fair to say that when he was governor, Catholic hospitals did have a secular ruling imposed on them against their religious beliefs.
Let's talk for a moment about what we saw just days ago. Washington State passed a piece of gay marriage legislation. The federal court out in California threw out Proposition 8. What would you do as president vis-a-vis gay marriage and it becoming a national issue? Clear it's going to the court.
Well, it's clearly going to have to be, one step would be to repass Defense of Marriage Act and eliminate the right of appeal to the court, which Congress has the power to do. It ultimately has to be a national solution. I mean, you can't have people who have one legal status in Connecticut and a different legal status in Rhode Island.
Right.
The system won't work as a practical matter. So this is inevitably going to end up as a national question.
And what would you say to those who say, but you're denying us our rights, we're married in this state, we love each other, what's wrong with that?
Well, and all I would say is that based on 3,000 years of tradition and our religious beliefs, that marriage is between a man and a woman, that there are other legal things that can be done, but marriage itself is a sacrament between a man and a woman.
Let's move on to immigration. I've been fascinated by your immigration position for a number of reasons. First of all, you support elements of the DREAM Act. You're also on record as saying you don't think families should be split up. Famously, the grandmother mentioned. How much of that, the evolution of that issue in your own mind, was due to your Catholic faith?
Not a lot of it. I mean, I've talked with various cardinals and bishops and with people in the church, and certainly Monsignor Rossi, the rector of the Basilica, had a huge impact on me. But it really grew up. My daughter, my older daughter, Kathy Lubbers, lives in Key Biscayne in Miami. And conversations with people and talking about genuine human concerns. Helen Kriebel, who's done terrific work at the Kriebel Foundation, had a big impact on me. And as you thought about it as a practical thing, I'm for controlling the border. Right. I am for having an easier deportation policy if somebody's shouldn't be here. For example, an MS-13 gang member, we should be able to get rid of pretty easily. I'm for a guest worker program. But it also occurred to me as you're trying to sort this out, if you're going to be honest about it, what do you do with somebody who's been here 25 years? They're married, they've been in the community, they've been paying their bills, they've been working, they have children and grandchildren. I don't believe we're going to go in and as you pointed out, pick up a grandmother and deport her forcefully with her entire family surrounding her and probably with her church providing a sanctuary. And so I've tried to find the practical road to get to a legal system that's enforceable and to do it in a way that virtually everybody who has no attachment will go home and either come back as a guest worker or not come back. But that you will finally, and there's no amnesty involved, nobody gets citizenship. But I do think there are practical ways to solve this.
Let's talk about climate change for a moment. Does the government have a role in regulating climate change? And do you think the climate change is man-made?
Well, first of all, I think the jury's out on whether it's man-made or not. I'm an amateur paleontologist, so I look at very long time horizons. And the Earth has been dramatically warmer than it is now. I was actually at the Field Museum in Chicago over Labor Day, and they had dinosaurs they collected from the Antarctic. So clearly it was much warmer at one time. But in addition, I think you have to have a question, you know, even if it was happening, is trying to stop it the most practical thing to do? You know, the Dutch have faced the ocean for all of their history. The Al Gore answer would have been to lower the sea. The Dutch built dikes. So you could ask a question, are there more practical other ways to solve it rather than giving control over our lives to a government bureaucracy? I think cap and trade was a socialist effort to use the environment as an excuse to gain control over the whole economy.
I've spoken to a lot of your colleagues in recent weeks, here on the Hill, all around. You were subject to blistering attacks from some of them a few weeks ago, notably Bob Dole, who said you're a one-man band who rarely took advice from anyone. How has your leadership style changed since you were Speaker in this building behind us? Well,
just to take that one example, Senator Dole and I had fundamental disagreements. I was against tax increases. He was for tax increases. Those were pretty intense personal fights. My leadership style has always been one of listening very widely and then making decisions. And when I was Speaker, I think I was very focused on getting things done. That's why we reformed welfare, with 2 out of 3 people going back to work or going to school. We had the first tax cut in 16 years and the largest capital gains tax cut in history. We had the only increase in intelligence spending in the 90s. The 9/11 Commission called it the Gingrich plus-up. And we got to 4 consecutive balanced budgets for the only time in your lifetime. Now, that takes real leadership. And in a legislative branch, real leadership sometimes steps on toes. It makes people uncomfortable because it says, you know, I mean, watch the current mess. You know, I didn't go along to get along. I said, we're going to get things done. You've heard the latest volley of attacks from Mitt Romney, your competitor, who says you and Rick Santorum are part of the problem. You're both Washington insiders, and under your leadership, earmarks doubled. You would say what? First of all, if you look at the Heritage Foundation study, under my leadership is the only time earmarks came down in 20 years. Second, the earmarks we got engaged in a fight with the Clinton administration was simple. You had a conservative Congress trying to impose certain values on a liberal Democratic president. That's the legitimate part of the conflict between the legislative and executive branches. But I think it's grandly ironic. The only two spending cuts since World War II, 1981, I helped Ronald Reagan. 1995, I was Speaker of the House. The only 4 balanced budgets in your lifetime came because I was Speaker. Governor Romney likes to pick and choose selective things and then distort them. I think it's pretty hard to make a case that we weren't the most conservative Congress fiscally in your lifetime, because we actually got to a balanced budget while cutting taxes and bringing unemployment down to 4.2%.
In South Carolina, Catholics supported you overwhelmingly. But since then, in Florida, 56% of Catholics went to Governor Romney. 48% of Catholics went to Governor Romney in Nevada. How do you win this key voting bloc, this important swing vote? And as a Catholic yourself, how do you do it?
Well, I think, first of all, you recognize that the scale of negative advertising that Governor Romney waged in Florida, he spent more money in Florida attacking me than my entire campaign has spent everywhere in the country. And so given that barrage, I'm lucky I'm still standing.
Yeah.
Second, I think as Catholics understand that he did in Massachusetts to Catholic hospitals exactly what Obama is trying to do in terms of imposing secular values. I think his support among Catholics will go down again, just as it did in South Carolina. Anywhere that I can communicate and can be effective in reaching people, we are winning votes. And the question is, how much money does he have left? And he did not go into Missouri and Minnesota and Colorado on Tuesday and spend the kind of money he had already spent in Florida. And we now have a pretty good sense that if he doesn't outspend you by 4 or 5 to 1, he can't win.
How do you now reemerge, if you will? The narrative here, at least in Washington, is Santorum swept 4 states now. He is the conservative alternative to Mitt Romney, and Gingrich has negatives at 56%. How do you combat that, and what do you do to bring your message of solutions back into this race?
Well, first of all, this is the same city that said in June and July I was dead. It's the same city that after I was ahead in Gallup by 12 points in December, when I got clobbered in Iowa by negative ads, said I was dead. Then when I came back and won in South Carolina, it held its breath, hoping that Florida would prove I was dead. You know, so Washington will be the last city in the country that accepts a Gingrich presidency, because I think they understand I represent real change. Starting at CPAC tomorrow, what I'm going to lay out is big solutions to get America working again. And I think by any fair person who looks at what I'm prepared to do for the economy, for the price of gasoline, for national security, for balancing the budget, and compare it to Romney and Santorum, will decide you have 2 timid candidates and 1 bold candidate. And I think the country instinctively realizes you've got to have bold changes in Washington to get back on track and to get America working again. Timid steps aren't going to get the job done.
I want to turn personal in our remaining moments here. We've gotten a lot of emails since our last meeting. And the question that routinely comes up, there is this still the discomfort with the baggage, if you will. And they're asking repeatedly, is your marriage with Callista, has it been normalized in the Catholic Church?
Yes, we were married in the church. I went through an annulment. You know, she's only been married once to me.
Right.
So, but I went through the annulment process. We're totally sanctified by the church, married in the church, and that's the only way we could be taking communion. I mean, otherwise it would be totally inappropriate.
How has your faith sustained you through this process, at times bitter and ugly, not only to you but toward your family members?
Well, when we did our movie on John Paul II, 9 Days That Changed the World, I was very struck by his belief, be not afraid. He didn't say have courage, because you have to have courage to overcome your fears.
Right.
He said, be not afraid. And there's a passage where someone describes his belief that the church, that the Soviet Union was against the cross because you could shelter under the cross, and therefore you could be safe from government. And I think that that's part of it. I find that, for example, we first heard the bishop's letter on the Obama administration in Mass in Jacksonville. Everywhere I go, and we just had Mass in Las Vegas this last Sunday, everywhere I go, I find that the priest and the community, the congregation, are all embracing. When people walk up and say, "Welcome home," and that it really is a giant community of believers. And that's something that you can fall back into. I would also say that Callista in particular has had an amazing number of people who walk up to her, thank us for running, tell her that we're in their prayers. And I think she would say that we've had that people, while the media gets tough and the opponent's ads get nasty, people have been wonderfully positive.
Final question: who's your favorite saint, and who do you rely on?
St. Paul. I think that his understanding of the challenge of being Christian in a pagan world is amazingly relevant to today, and I find him to be somebody whose writing is permanently teaches you and strengthens you.
Very good.